So, schönen guten Vormittag. Good morning to all of you here at the conference stage of Ars Electronica 2017. It's actually the third time that we have this wonderful but also very challenging opportunity to use the premises of the Postcity, as we named it. Actually, the building that we are here has been the former logistics center of the Austrian Postal Services. So for almost 20 years, in this building, thousands of letters and packages arrived every morning, and they were sorted out and distributed and then driven away by lorries, by train, and also, of course, by postmen themselves on their bicycles. So it used to be the center where information and goods have been distributed, coming in, coming out. So it's quite symbolically that in the age of digital technologies, digital media, big data, and of course the future of artificial intelligence, we do our festival, these gatherings, these conferences here in this space. And it's always very difficult to be on stage here because you have to behave like one of these parcels on conveyor belts, always looking in different directions. But we thought the space is so nice here. Why should we just make a frontal stage when we can make this very nice circle? I apologize to the speakers, and it's always sometimes most of the time you look into the back of people, but for everybody who will join the stage, you know, that's the way how you should talk to people. And it's really inspiring because the more you circle, so well, that's, I hope you have enough time. I hope all of you will stay several days here in Linz at the Postcity, at the Ars Electronica. This is, as you might know, just one of the 12 venues of this year's festival. We have a total of 1,050 artists, lecturers, scientists, presenters who are coming for these 5 days physically here as people to present their works and their ideas to you. It's quite a big thing, but you will see we did our best to organize it in quite clear areas and sectors concerning content, concerning formats of the festival as well. A very important part, of course, of every Ars Electronica is the main symposium, the Symposium. You all have seen artificial intelligence, the other eye. This is the topic of this year. And as the subtitle clearly indicates, this will not be a usual science engineering conference about artificial intelligence, where we talk about all the different types of softwares and how the things are being done. We are really focusing totally on the ethical, societal, the cultural dimension of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the big hype in these days, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to use this hype also as a mirror, to reflect and to look at our relationship with technology. Especially when it comes to these discussions now in the public about artificial intelligence, very often we hear the people talk about the danger of their technology. We talk about it as if it would be something completely external, something that has been dropping down from sky, maybe some aliens flying with a UFO and dropping down this technology to punish us. But of course, that's totally stupid. It's just the way how we always like to do it, you know. Put the responsibility away. It's not me who is responsible, it's the technology. But of course, we know there is not a single piece of technology on this planet that has not been dreamt of, conceived, realized, and applied by us, by human beings. So if we are afraid of anything when we think about artificial intelligence, actually the only thing we are afraid of is us, ourselves. We're afraid of what we might be able to do with all this technology. So we think it's extremely important at this moment not to be super afraid what the problems could be in 100 years maybe, when this technology, maybe when these computers are more powerful, more intelligent than us. But what can we do the next 10 to 20 years to shape the direction of this development in a way that we actively contribute to avoid these negative scenarios? And at the end, it's all about our responsibility. This is what the festival is about, this is what this conference is about. And we are very happy and very proud to have really many very distinguished experts here as speakers today. And before I spend all the time, I hand over to the protagonists of today. And first of all, I would like to introduce Martina Mara. We are very proud that Martina Mara is working in Ars Electronica Future Lab since many years. She's one of the first, or maybe even the first, robot psychologist, at least the first one I ever knew, I ever heard about it. And it's not just a fancy title. She seriously made all her studies and education to cover both of these areas. And she will guide us, or will guide you through this morning session. And without any further ado, Martina, thank you very much for taking over this challenge to moderate the museum. Thank you, and have a nice morning session.
Thank you, Gerfried, for this nice introduction. There has been a robo-psychologist in Isaac Asimov's stories already, I have to admit. As Gerfried mentioned already, I think, or I'm pretty sure that there's no other topic in current times that both fascinates and frightens people as much as it is the case with artificial intelligence. I'm very happy that we're going to have the great opportunity to listen to 11 really great speakers today who will open up all kinds of different perspectives on artificial intelligence, not from the alien perspective, but with a very internal approach and very practice-based approach. We will hear about potential risks and benefits of artificial intelligence. We will hear about ethics, about technological foundations, about creativity, about learning, and of course, a lot about humankind. Which means, coming back to the tradition of Ars Electronica, we're going to have 11 speakers who talk about technology, society, and art. We're going to start right now with the first session of today, which is called Reality and Expectations. And I want to warmly welcome Robert Trappl to the stage and introduce him, please. Robert Trappl. And I'm so happy that he is with us today. He's the head of the Austrian Research Institute for Artificial Intelligence. He's also a research partner in the, you all know it, very important European Human Brain Project. He has all kinds of academic backgrounds. It's amazing. He has studied electrical engineering, he has studied psychology, sociology, astronomy, and even management. He's a professor of medical cybernetics and artificial intelligence at the University of Vienna. He has published and co-edited 180 papers and more than 30 books. And as far as I know, he also likes to perform contemporary dance, sometimes even on stage. So, Robert Trappl, whatever means you choose to introduce us to the past, present, and future of AI today, the stage is yours for the next 25 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much for your welcome. Really, as Martina just said, artificial intelligence at present is the total hype. I'm just coming from the International Dance Weeks, where they invited me to give a workshop on artificial intelligence dance. So unfortunately, I can't show you what I did there, because we don't have time enough, but maybe at a later moment. So I skipped all slides because I've only 25, means now 24 minutes, to give a short introduction into AI, past, present, future. You may want to hear first, what is AI? What are definitions of AI? And maybe you will hear 20 more of them today, so I bring the two I like most. Definition 1, to make computers smart. Definition 2, to develop models of our psyche, our psyche. And that means for now of our brain, to get a better understanding of ourselves. So these two definitions are the ones I like most. Short story of AI. I don't know if you know all of it. In 1956, an American mathematician, John McCarthy, had the idea to bring people together who did not only want to number crunch with computers, but also to process concepts. And to get money for that, he had to invent an interesting title, and the title was Artificial Intelligence. Still interesting for us. And at the conference, there came, where it was in 1956 at the Dartmouth College, there came quite a lot of people who presented works which were not only number crunching. And the most interesting was some of the guys had developed a program which played a game, and he himself couldn't beat the program. Up to then, everybody thought a program can only be as smart as the programmer is. And suddenly, he couldn't win against it. What was the trick? He used this program to play with people who were better than he was. And this program could learn. It was not deep learning. There were no models of any neurons in it, but it could learn, and it was better than he was. And at that moment, I want to make a comment on deep learning. You all know this is a great method, a very successful method. But we should be aware, we have in the history of AI many excellent methods, which at that time people thought that is AI. And it turned out excellent methods. But 5 years, 10 years later, we had other methods which were also excellent methods. So now, please don't identify AI with deep learning. Deep learning is an excellent method, but not identical with AI. It's one important method of AI. We have several others which we still use for other problems and which we will use. So this is just because I read it so often, it's, I think, important to distinguish that. So the methods developed after 1956 were, for example, knowledge representation, reasoning, language methods, and many others, which are still in use. Then, and with these methods, in 1997, the world champion, world master of chess lost against the program. And people were surprised, is that possible? But other people who read the literature, the publications, knew that was predictable. Because if you have a game which you have many options to make the next draw, you will find out that you get a combinatorial explosion of all possibilities. But the faster the computers are, the larger the memories. You can't predict how many years will it take that you can calculate all possibilities. So it was predicted in the early 90s it would take probably until the year 2000 that the world's best chess player would lose. It was a little bit earlier, 3 years, computer developed faster, but it was predictable. Now let's move to the present. What happened last year? The big surprise. It was possible that the best Go player, the world champion, lost against the computer program. And that really was a movement, a shock to the scientific community, plus the best Go players. And why? It was unpredictable. We guessed 10 years, 20 years. It's so complex. You can't do that. It's impossible to model that. And it was a different strategy. Naturally, this strategy didn't come out of nothing. Already in the 80s, people simulated nerve cells. Well, actually, any similarity between these artificial cells and real nerve cells just happens. It's like a disclaimer in a movie to say there is practically no similarity. Nerve cells work totally different. We are now capable to model very simple properties of nerve cells in spiking neurons, but these artificial neurons don't spike. It is also not necessary that they spike, but there are no similarities, or hardly any, with neurons which you have, which I have, which most animals have. So the idea which is behind that, which in the 1980s people said, this is the way humans are thinking, we have a new way, connectionism. And at the very same moment they said, and all other methods is good old-fashioned AI, abbreviated GoFi. If you do GoFi and not neural networks, 0. And then, after some years, it turned out there are limits to these methods, and good old-fashioned AI was successful again and used for nearly 30 years. Early in this decade, some scientists had smart ideas. Couldn't we, with the help of faster computers, computers with bigger, by far larger memories, couldn't we try to learn the lessons of the 80s of neural networks and build by far more complex programs, which they did, and that's deep learning, with, again, some more similarities to humans. If you have convolutional networks, then what you are simulating is the function of the eye, the contrast enhancement which we have in our retina. So there are similarities to how we humans work. Now, and you know, one of the men who worked in that area was Geoffrey Hinton. Geoffrey Hinton, now with his group, moved to Google. The guy and his group who developed AlphaGo, the program, which played Go better than Lysidor, that group, under heading of Demis Hassabis, was in the meantime bought by Google. And I have to add, we also just work in our research institute in a project with Google, because it's a fascinating company. But I suppose we won't be bought with around $500 million by Google, and we love to remain in Vienna and enjoy life and don't get directions from far away. One of the interesting methods which Demis Hassabis is using is reinforcement learning. You may know it's about 100 years ago that Thorndike trained rats to press a lever and to find food. So the idea which you could apply to deep learning structures is to make them learn by getting reinforcements when they approach the right solution. I can only refer to a presentation on Monday, where you will hear by, I think about 1 or 1.5 hours, a description of the functioning of deep learning. Unfortunately, time does not permit to do that now. I have 23 minutes, 25 minutes altogether, and that means I have to come to a summary, and that is future. We have past, present, future for that 25 minutes, and Martina will give me a sign. 5, 4, 3, 10. Great. Okay. Slow down. So, how will the future look like? The future in 9 minutes. Well, one of the important developments we have now is deep learning. So, research will continue in deep learning, and there are already developments which show into which directions that could go. It's competitive learning, it's called adversarial learning networks, and that's the interesting, it's unsupervised compared to the present method. Details on Monday. I think another very important topic, and I won't discuss here self-driving cars, we all agree they will come, we don't know when, and they are really an important thing. The one, an aspect which very few people think about is emotions. Emotions will become very important for AI. Psychological research already in the mid-90s of the last century showed that if you have people who have little, few, small, or no emotions at all, they make worse rational decisions than those with emotions. And that was a surprise, because one thought the rational subject, at least in economy, you heard about you have to make rational decisions, no emotions. That's wrong. Emotionality and rationality are not opposite. They are an excellent combination. They support each other. Therefore, we have to study more about emotions. We have made an artificial intelligence since 1956 without emotions. We have intelligence, but emotions was missing. So I think this will be a very important topic. Especially important if we consider another area, which I think will become more and more important. It's my personal view, and ask me in 10 years when I was wrong, in which aspects. I'm sure I will be wrong in some of them, and that is personality models. If we want to interact with programs, especially with robots, they have to have some kind of personality. I would love to explain to you a simple personality model like belief, desires, intentions model, consisting of beliefs. That's an idea. You have beliefs about the world. You know, or you believe that you are sitting here and that you're hearing some guy who tells you some stories of which 90% may be wrong, but hopefully it's interesting. But you believe it. We have no certainty. And the same holds for computers or for robots. And we have desires to make us a real person, a person which we can interact with. We have to have motivation, drives, needs, etc. And in that respect, we have to model desires, we have to model emotions. And when both come together, then we make plans, we reason, we have intentions, how to really bring them into effect. So we have beliefs, desires, intentions. BDI models are one of the interesting, there are several personality models. And I think with emotions, together with emotions, we will have to develop them further. Now, robots will have to be developed. If you compare what is the success of of AI programs compared to robots, we have AI programs who beat the best Go player. I am still waiting for a robot who competes in a skiing tournament, Riesentorlauf or something like that. Have you ever seen a robot there? The problem is that not even on the Idiotenhügel you find robots who try to ski. There are a few attempts, but robots are far behind. However, if you find time, look at the most recent development of Boston Dynamics, the Handle robot, developed and presented this year. You find an impressive YouTube video and you will say, oh, that sounds quite interesting. That has a chance of solution. When we have robots at the workplace or as partners, we want to have them a personality. future is difficult to predict. 4 years ago, I edited a book with the title, Your Virtual Butler, The Making Of. I would have liked to use it, Your Cybernetic Butler, but the publisher said, that's already a title registered, you can't use it. And we discussed how should these robots be who interact with people in the long run, especially with people with special needs. In the meantime, if you look at the development of exoskeletons, so structures which are outside persons, and give them flexibility, more power, maybe that people won't want robots which help them, but maybe they prefer exoskeletons which make it possible for them to move around. So to make predictions or to guess how developments will be, that's absolutely difficult. There is a book written about love and sex with robots. You may have heard about it. The author is David Levi, and he says that probably not long ago, people will marry robots. So I looked at the Austrian marriage law, and it doesn't say it's forbidden to marry a robot. However, there's one limit, namely each partner has to be at least 16 years old. Would you like to marry a 16-year-old robot? So I do think this is quite unlikely. And I have a whole list of probable impacts of AI, and even in 1986 I published the book, Impacts of Artificial Intelligence. It's really fun to read now. I can recommend it. And if you want, I can send. I have a few copies left, which I can send to you. We agree AI is a disruptive technology. We know AI will change society, will change our lives. Will it be a threat? I don't know. I find interesting in that respect a book which was written by a Japanese robot designer who is an expert in Buddhism. It's Masahiro Mori. I apologize for wrong pronunciations. I'm sure I did it wrong. You may know him because he defined the uncanny valley. And this book reads the Buddha in the robot. So I think this is an idea how to approach the problem. Robots, AI is not our enemy. If we cooperate with them, it can be for the great benefit of us and for our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. What I forgot to mention is we have two great simultaneous interpreters. Yeah, applause for them. Are you translating English into German? And back. Okay. If you need a translation system, you can pick it up at the entrance of the conference hall. All right, so I'm sure that there are lots of questions to Robert Trappl concerning either his talk or his dance. Please remember them, because before we're going to start with a Q&A session, we're going to listen to our next speaker, who is Joanna Zylinska. She is a professor of new media and communications at Goldsmiths University of London. She works as an artist, as a curator, and very interestingly, she has also translated Stanislav Lem's philosophical writings, right? She's the author of 5 highly inspiring books, such as Minimal Ethics of the Anthropocene. And in general, I heard that she likes to explore the end of man in all its tragic comical aspects. Today, she's gonna talk about the Man 2.0 and the returning of RoboCop and Terminator. Please welcome Joanna Zylinska.
Hi, okay. Thank you to the whole team at Ars Electronica for having me here and for all the organizational matters in making my trip happen. I'm delighted to be here. Let me start with a little bit of background. My interest in robots, cyborgs, and sorry, can I check if the slides are on? The slides are on the screen? No. Can I have the slides on the screen now? Okay. Good. Yeah. No. So I want this. Lovely. Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm going to time myself, 25 minutes. So let me start with a little bit of background. My interest in robots, cyborgs, and other humanoid manifestations of artificial intelligence goes back more than 20 years, when I was finishing my PhD and starting to produce my first publications. Cybernetics, robotics, and AI opened up for me the possibility of going beyond the religiously inflected assumptions about the human and of recognizing that we have always been technical beings, that we came into being via and with technology, via fire, flint stones, used as both tools and weapons. But I was also interested in the feminist take on the cyborg and robot, in the critique of the military-industrial complex by the likes of Donna Haraway, and also in the need to understand the embodiment of technology beyond data streams. But the current purchase of machines that can both enslave and liberate us, and whose intelligence can compete with or even exceed ours, seems to have diminished in the late 1990s, early 2000s. So in my teaching, I often pose a question to my students. Is the cyborg still a useful concept, or has it become obsolete? And for a while, they've been saying, no, it's a bit dated, it's a bit 80s, it's a bit gauche. When obviously scientists and engineers were still tinkering in their labs, or the cyborg as other, a figure of both immense promise and immense threat, slowly retreated from public imagination. Now, part 3 of Terminator series even performed a symbolic annihilation of the masculine cyborgian figure, with melancholy beaten down Arnold replaced by TX, a smart gynoid Terminatrix. So we can therefore suggest that 2003 announced the death of the masculine cyborg as a host for AI, opening up towards more collaborative bottom-up models of human, non-human intelligence and artificial life. Dolly the sheep, cellular automata, neural networks. But now, 15 years later, as the cyborg as the human's other, framed by renewed interest in artificial intelligence, has returned. And of course, artificial intelligence doesn't just come in the shape of robots, androids, cyborgs, but I'm interested in the packaging of that narrative and that research in the language of media and in certain cultural icons that come to haunt us. So I'm aware of, and I'm not sure that a lot of speakers today will be speaking about different incarnations, more complex, more interesting perhaps, but for me that particular visuality is what's at stake. As a media scholar, I'm also interested in the cultural connotations of this return. Why are we hearing so much about robots, cyborgs, and AI again? Why now? What kinds of promises and threats are being made in AI's name? Is AI our enemy, our savior, our kin? Or is it part of us, the other I, das andere Ich, as the title of this edition of Ars Electronica playfully suggests? What models of the human are the developments in AI and the stories told about those developments bringing in? And what is being made hidden or obsolete in the process? So by way of tackling these questions, I want to make a proposition. The present return of the cyborg, the robot, the android, that is a renewed interest in artificial intelligence on the part of Silicon Valley researchers and investors, and a packaging of this interest in humanoid shapes by and for the media, is a response, although not necessarily a direct or even acknowledged one, to a number of planetary scale issues, such as climate change, the depletion of the Earth's resources, and the accelerated extinction of various species. In other words, I'm proposing to connect the promises made by artificial intelligence researchers with the dominant crisis narrative of our time, the Anthropocene. Posited as a new geological epoch in which human influence upon the geo and biosphere has been irreversible, as evident in phenomena such as extensive agriculture, industrialization, and population growth, the Anthropocene has become a new epistemological filter through which we humans see ourselves. I'm also proposing the term to see AI as the Anthropocene imperative, a demand to respond to a situation, a call to responsibility issued to all of us humans. Now, before I proceed further with my analysis, I want to show you my critical take on the present return of the cyborg in a slightly different medium. I've made a kind of 6-minute photo film titled Exit Man, and it raises questions about the remodeling of the human in the Anthropocene era in a top-down way promoted by the tech industry. But it also considers the possibility of envisaging the other I, which is always part of me. So it's more like mycelium than like a robot. I'm going to show you the first part of the film now. Could we have the sound, please?
The belief in seemingly interminable growth has led to depletion, scarcity, and the crisis of biological and social life. This apocalyptic state of events has been called the Anthropocene. Stretching back at least 250 years to the early days of fossil fuel excavation and burning, the Anthropocene can't be seen and hence known by us contemporary humans.
Sorry about that. It always happens at tech events, doesn't it? I teach new media and it always, yeah. Maybe a bit louder, please, sorry.
The belief in seemingly interminable growth has led to depletion, scarcity, and the crisis of biological and social life. This apocalyptic state of events has been called the Anthropocene. Stretching back at least 250 years to the early days of fossil fuel excavation and burning, the Anthropocene can't be seen and hence known by us contemporary humans because of the vastness of time across which it has unfolded. It can only be visualized, singularly yet repeatedly. Such visualizations usually draw on apocalyptic tropes straight from the Book of Revelation, images of the blackening of the sun, of heaven falling onto the earth, of lands being moved out of their places. Yet they only show us what we are capable of seeing, while hiding the most dramatic message of the Anthropocene, the end of man and everything else. No picture can convey the fact that soon there will be nothing to see, and no one to see it. Current Anthropocene visuality ultimately has a mollifying effect. We are thus slowly being appeased into accepting the status quo about the condition of our planet. We are also being persuaded that salvation from the Anthropocene's finalism will soon arrive from a godlike elsewhere. It will either take the form of an escape to heavens, in the form of planetary relocation, or it will happen via an actual upgrade of humans to the status of gods. In both of these Silicon Valley-fueled prophecies, man arrives in the technological New Jerusalem fully redeemed and redesigned. In the humanist imperialism of the Anthropocene era, man has thus succeeded in elevating himself above the complex planetary processes to reclaim a divine position, that of the maker and destroyer of worlds. But he achieves his godlike status at the cost of sacrificing sexual and biological difference, disavowing his kinship with women and those of non-binary gender, with animals, fungi and microbes. The man of the neo-apocalypse emerges standing, proudly erect. This disavowal of cross-gender and cross-species kinship is a condition for the preservation of man's self-belief and self-appointed authority, allowing him continued dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Should we therefore panic about the end of man, or should we rather welcome it, and maybe question what it is that is actually ending? Shouldn't we rather try and chip away at the apocalyptic habit that is also the foundation of man's fictitious authority? Is it not time to reclaim and rewrite the prophecy about the end of man? One way to start may be by challenging the widespread belief that salvation from the current planetary apocalypse will come from another place. Such outsider solutions are not just being proposed by high-tech entrepreneurs on their celestial missions. They are also part of our current political landscape, with its procession of strongmen that are promising us earthly redemption and perpetual abundance.
Okay, so that's it for now. And let me return to the slides. Okay. Is everyone seeing the slides now? No. Could we see the slides, please? The guys at the back are waving at each other, so something's happening. Yes? Okay, thank you. So the present anxiety about the condition of our planet and the extinction of the human species manifests itself in the panic about the scarcity of resources available to sustain humanity, in concerns over the aging of populations, in renewed interest in artificial intelligence on the part of Silicon Valley, and in biotechnology research into ways of upgrading the human all the way to immortality. But in accusing the human of being the cause of all these planetary disasters, the Anthropocene narrative actually aggrandizes the human by reinstating the supposedly sexless yet very gendered man to the center of action. Tom Cohen and Claire Colebrook point out that the narrative of humans as a destructive species hasn't only generated the imperative to survive. If we discover ourselves to be an agent of destruction, then we must reform, regroup, and live on. It's also produced what they have termed a hyperhumanism, which I would like to rename here Project Man 2.0. Project Man 2.0 entails a secular mobilization of religious imagery, with singular man now rebranded as Homo Deus, or the God species. The term Homo Deus has been used by journalist Mark Linus in his popular science book. A lapsed environmentalist who spent years destroying genetically modified crops, Linus eventually saw the light. He realized not only that the green movement was not a solution to the planetary problems, but also that it often exacerbated these problems. For example, by facilitating the construction of coal plants in places where nuclear plants have been cancelled. For the newly illuminated Linus, any solution to the planet's problems had to lie in conscious planetary management on the part of humans, embracing science-backed solutions while giving up on any fantasy of uncontaminated nature. Now, so far, so blandly unproblematic. Yet the God species has a weird parochialism to it. This is manifested in the proposal to abandon any such unpleasantries as calls for limiting human growth and productivity, or God forbid capitalism, the profit principle, or the market. Now, Linus suggests we focus instead on identifying, and I kid you not, a safe space in the planetary system within which humans can operate and flourish indefinitely, in whatever way they choose. So the humanist tone for this argument is already set in the book's hubristic opening, an account of entrepreneur Craig Venter's experiment with synthesizing life, retold as a neo-biblical story. Then man said, "Let there be life," and there was life. What is meant here is that the synthetic genome Venter had developed in his lab in 2010 started reproducing, except it's not the full story. Venter's team had to insert the computer-manufactured genome into an already existing non-synthetic wet bacterial cell from which his native DNA had been extracted, thus merely enacting some lifelike processes in a medium that already supported what biology conventionally recognizes as life, rather than creating any such life from scratch. So this is the story of creation as retold by venture capitalists. Yet Linus seems oblivious to the political consequences of this shift. Indeed, his use of theological metaphors obscures the unequal distribution of the consequences of human-induced planetary intervention, positioning the Anthropocene in terms of a supposedly eternal struggle of man versus nature. Now, Linus admits to being tired of the idea of perennial human victimhood, and thus offers to reboot the human as a God species whose only trajectory is upwards. His is therefore a version of what eco-entrepreneur Alice Erler has called a good Anthropocene, one in which humans can be proud of their achievements rather than lose too much sleep over the side effects. But the good Anthropocene is really a new version of the good man, a prelapsarian Adam that can go back to and commune with God, while also knowing that God is nothing else but a mirror image of his own self. At the end of the day, there is just Adam, a white Christian Adam playing with himself. There is no God, no serpent, and perhaps most significantly of all, no Eve. Indeed, no, Eve gets a say in Linus's New Jerusalem, as it has been designed as a safe space in which the white man can safely rejoice in his own ingenuousness. There is also no dissensus, no conflict, and no inherent contradiction in the wishes and desires of the inhabitants of this safe space, because they are all just imaginary clones of our man 2.0. It is therefore perhaps understandable that Linus should joyfully declare, "This is no time for pessimism." However, when listening to his story about planetary catastrophes and ways of overcoming them, we should be mindful of feminist theologian Catherine Keller and her reflection that an apocalyptic narrative is absolutely optimistic for its own believers, though radically pessimistic as to human historical aspirations. In the world of Linus and his post-nature eco-mates, it's Eve and other earthly creatures that have become extinct. And these historical aspirations on the part of the human may soon be superseded anyway, because their holder will himself undergo a planetary transformation. The apocalyptic sounding end of man will therefore be an upgrade, an evolution of the fleshy model that is becoming obsolete thanks to AI and other technologies. And thus, if the planet is proving to be more and more uninhabitable, the next logical step for the redeemers of today is to reach for what Linus calls, without irony, a techno-fix. This perhaps explains the renewed interest in 1980s cyborg discourses, which are now returning in the guise of human enhancement research, gerontology, and AI. The Anthropocene thus ushers in not just apocalyptic narratives about the disappearance of man as a species, but also redemptive discourses about the human's upgrade, about the remodeling of the old design for the global post-warming era. Man 2.0 as Homo Deus seems to be a fulfillment of a prophecy issued by entrepreneur Stuart Brand of the Whole Earth catalogue fame. We are as gods and have to get good at it. Now, the notion of Homo Deus has recently made a literal appearance in an eponymous volume penned by another visionary of the whole world, Yuval Noah Harari. After Sapiens, Cosmic History of the Human, set in deep time, Harari has now turned his attention to the currently popular genre of secular prophecy, which nevertheless remains steeped in religious overtones. Given that famines, plagues, and wars have been supposedly conquered, or at least reined in as far as the prosperous regions of the world are concerned, with sugar now being more dangerous than gunpowder, the only barrier left is fleshiness itself, he claims. Yet just as climate change is seen by the proponents of the good Anthropocene as requiring a technical fix, the Anthropos himself is seen as fully fixable, to an extent where death becomes rebranded as technical glitch. Citing research and investment into solving death by inventor Ray Kurzweil, Google Ventures investment fund manager Bill Maris, and PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel, Harari concludes, the writing's on the wall. Equality is out, immortality is in. The fantasy of immaculate conception will thus be realized, seemingly by 2200, with others offering 2050 as the deadline, by instating Silicon Valley venture capitalists as fathers of immortality, regenerating life one cell at a time. Harari seems neutrally diagnostic most of the time, although occasionally his impassive narrative borders on the critical. For example, when looking at the ideology of dataism, which rebrands humans as data processing units, and then sets off to reap the benefits of this rebranding. Yet Homo Deus actually preserves a rather conservative version of man as a future-proofed survivor, with his organs regenerated and his tissue replenished for generations to come, or replaced by more durable non-organic parts. Such developments occur against the uncanny valley of Silicon capital, with its geo-economic fault lines obscured by the Nasdaq indices. Harari's chapter on the Anthropocene ends with humanist triumphalism, whereby the ostensible critique of the humanist model, propped up by notions such as the soul, language, or individuality, ends up celebrating human ingenuity. What's missing from Harari's account is an acknowledgement of the very gesture on the part of this human actor to carve out the Homo sapiens as a discrete entity, to intricate him, her, from the various material and political entanglements, and to speculate about his developmental trajectory into the future, radical evolution of the mind, his merging with robots and computers. Harari does recognize that the human is just another kind of animal, and actually makes numerous pitches for veganism as the only ethically defensible stance with regard to coexisting with other species. But his arrow of time still flies alongside the history of man as we know him, only slightly more re-engineered. The problem, therefore, lies not with the cognitive restrictions that the future imposes on us. The problem lies with the cognitive blind spot Harari brings to his understanding of the human as a discrete subject of history, a diminished yet ultimately solipsistic Robocop, who may just succeed in getting away with the whole Anthropocene unpleasantness because he's better than other species at teaming up with other Robocops and at inventing stories, and transmitting them to his genetic kin. Rats, cockroaches, and microbes, no obvious storytellers as far as we can tell, will most likely prove him wrong. So should man's upgrade progress fail or take too long, an alternative counter-Anthropocene plan is currently under development, man's planetary relocation. Faced with the prospect of an impending apocalypse on Earth, many scientists, inventors, and entrepreneurs are already lining up to embark on a celestial trip. Wheelchair-bound theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking has joined the queue, recently announcing, "I think the human race has no future if it doesn't go to space." So the supposed inevitability of cross-planetary migration is usually presented via the familiar colonizing rhetoric with its gendered assumptions about dominion and conquest and its eschatological fantasies of the disembodied mind. I'm mentioning all this here because the notion of the singular genius that can offer us this kind of liberatory trip returns in the current speculation on both AI and planetary travel, with attempts to take us there presented precisely as an adventure trip led by bold male pioneers, bravely venturing where few would dare to go. The gendered connotations of these ambitions are quite explicit. Elon Musk, inventor and founder of Tesla Motors and SpaceX, the latter being a company that will take us to Mars, is a case in point. Musk's spiraling ambitions are widely praised by Silicon Valley, with commentators frequently comparing him to eponymous Iron Man superhero Tony Stark. In the keynote presented at the 67th International Astronautical Congress in Guadalajara in September 2016, Musk explained that the two fundamental paths were facing humanity today: staying on Earth and eventually becoming extinct, or developing into a spacefaring civilization and a multiplanetary species. Dreams of life on Mars have, of course, a long history. But what's new about Musk's plan, it's not so much his desire to find life, sophisticated or emerging on Mars, but rather his ambition to take life to Mars in the form of human cargo. Planning to start colonization in 2022, the main obstacle in realizing them at the moment is the high cost of spacecraft construction, something Musk promises to address by developing a so-called SpaceX interplanetary transport system. Musk's Astronautical Congress keynote was richly illustrated with seductive images of pointy and hard bullet-like rockets with rounded heads steaming, throbbing, and then rising up to pierce the Earth's pink and soft atmosphere on their journey to Mars. It was CGI space porn of the highest caliber, and it was being lapped up by the wild crowd. So just the last minute, by way of ending my talk and of suggesting how to envisage other ways of being in the world, other ways of being human and being non-human, beyond the narrow parameters of the AI debate, the way it's currently staged in kind of both in the big investment events and in kind of media, and that remains haunted by the specter of the planetary scale catastrophe, call it the Anthropocene or the end of man or the end of our planet. I would like to kind of propose something I'm calling a feminist counter-apocalypse. So it's a kind of narrative that draws still very much on scientific developments around kind of planetary science, around kind of Earth system science, around research in robotics, engineering, and computing, and so on, but tries to acknowledge a kind of more distributed model of subjectivity. One that recognizes humans' entanglements, not just, with a robot being or not being our other eye, but thinking about our kinship with bacteria, with microbes, the models that are drawing on perhaps later research in artificial life, in which a different form of kind of identity and modeling emerges. And because I've run out of time, but it's part of a bigger project in which I'm going to conceptually propose and kind of critique some of the gender assumptions behind the current debate, but also propose, I think, ethically and politically better subjectivity models for thinking about that kind of relationality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joanna. Could you please stay a little more with us on stage? And Robert, also please come back to us, because now we're going to have the opportunity to ask some questions to both of them. Are there any questions in the audience to Robert or Joanna? Yeah. Martina. Do we have them? Where's the mic? Okay. Hi. Professor Ishii first, and then the lady in red.
Hi, good morning. I'm Hiroshi from MIT, and I really appreciate this opening to set the stage about AI. When I landed MIT 22 years ago, Professor Marvin Minsky was next to my office. He's the founder of AI. Dartmouth Conference, 1950, was beginning. But the 1980s, the new movement of distributed AI came. So today, seems AI is singular, I is still singular, but now everything, including bacteria, environment, become intelligent. Real swarm intelligence, maybe using a term Horst Heltner is insisting, claiming. So in the era of the ecosystem massively parallel intelligence, maybe singular AI or I may not work anymore to understand. So I wonder what kind of a conceptual framework or theoretical framework would be useful for us to think about the era of the massively complex ecosystem that virtually everything can have kind of the intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously, what I'm trying to do with this project as well, on the one hand, to look at certain threats and promises that we humans articulate about our own positioning in the world, drawing on different kind of research in that you've mentioned, and identifying different stages in kind of robotics and engineering, cybernetics. At the same time, I'm slightly surprised and disappointed by a return of some very conservative and truncated models, partly in popular imagination, but partly in the way they also borrowed by many researchers who kind of seem to have taken certain steps back, so almost ignoring all the kind of models of connectivity. Now, I'm wary of moving towards just, or everything is connected, because if we just say, well, everything is connected with everything else, we end up with banality. So that, for me, and in my philosophical work, which kind of builds, I come out of continental philosophy and I work with media theory, but I work with the notion of the cut. You can find the notion of the cut in Bergson and Deleuze, and you can find it in Karen Barrett, now working with physics. So the notion of the cut is a moment of a resolution, and the human as an agent in whom we humans have a lot of investment in a narcissistic way, makes these cuts, enacts cuts. So even though everything is connected with everything else, not everything is connected in the same way. And that kind of, so on the one hand, you recognize, expand the scope of subjectivity, or model of connectivity. On the other hand, you still return through kind of ethical political probing to enacting these cuts on various scales and ask questions from the position of here and now. And they are not just engineering, technical, or even philosophical questions. They are political questions, economic questions, social questions. How do we cut that through that connectivity? Who enacts these cuts? How do we know that certain connections matter more than others? Who is in control? Who decides about these connections?
No. No? That was...
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for both your talks, very interesting. But I only have a question to Robert regarding, of course, this concept of emotions in AI. And you were mentioning like intentions, desires, and what was the third category? Beliefs, yes. And I would like to ask you to tell us a bit more about this concept of emotions, because I'm not sure if a belief or a intention really can be called an emotion. Isn't an emotion much more like something like being sad, happy, angry, whatever? So I'm not sure if it's just some kind of brand using the concept emotion, you know, the idea of emotion, to put it on some, again, maybe more rational considerations, how to deal with these problems of what you were telling us, deep learning and so on. Thank you.
Oder? Super, danke. Yeah, thank you very much. You have independently, it was developed in the mid-90s, this concept of beliefs, desires, emotions as a general concept, how we should attempt to model personality, but only a very simple first version. I didn't mention, by the way, you would need a theory of mind in your belief system, which makes it very complex because it has to be reflexive, etc. It turned out that you can't build a good model of personality without taking into consideration emotions. Because we have motivations, but what makes us act, bring us to intentions, is that we have an emotional reward. The outcome should be influencing us in a positive, emotionally positive way. And therefore the personality, and there are many other aspects of emotions. For example, memory retrieval depends on very much on emotions. You remember things better if they are emotionally loaded. Or communication, interaction. Emotion enables you to see 20 meters away in which status or emotional state a person is, at least vaguely. But you usually don't have a chance to hear the person, to touch the person, but you see an expression of emotion. So emotions turn out to be extremely important, especially in the times we now have. You know, for example, we are working with an Austrian internet newspaper, Standard.at. Like many other journals, they run into the problem that during the last 2-3 years, people have become by far more emotional in their comments. And you have to filter out those comments or to interfere with those people who bring so much emotion that rational discussion is no longer possible. So you have to make sentiment analysis of comments. So we are in a sometimes exaggerating emotional era, but I think if it will cool down, I hope it will cool down, then we need emotions in modeling of personalities. Does that answer your question? Part of
because I think it's interesting to you were mentioning now like too many emotions in the comment.
Yes.
But what kind of emotions? Is it anger? Is it so-called bad emotions? And what are the good ones? You were mentioning rewarding good behavior or whatever. Yeah. So I think this is really something which should be discussed much more.
A very complex topic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But thanks for the additional information.
Attempt to reply. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We had a third question here.
Also, is it on? Yeah, it's on. Also a question to Robert. Emotion is, I understand emotion, what you're saying, it's a trait that can aid to better decisions. But what is about personality? I mean, any artificial system has some intention because that is basically built into it. Without it, it wouldn't do anything. So intention is there. Why would it improve technical systems? Beyond the fact that it might lead to a better user interface because it's more natural to have someone to deal with who has a personality. But beside that, do you see an advantage in the technology sense? And let me add on to the question to the UI. Maybe humans are becoming more like machines in the future, but that is maybe another aspect.
Yeah, so the first question which you raised is, I think we will interact by far more with intelligent and probably emotional machines. So we have to try to model them in such a way that we can more easily interact than typing in something, or so that I think is a prerequisite, and they should also understand our emotions. I know that there are scientists who say computers, robots should not express emotions because they are fake, which is true. We don't have any computers or robots for now who can feel emotions. They can, more or less well, understand, recognize emotions, process them, and express them. But they don't have the feeling of emotions, as Damasio would call that. I think for the interactions, we will need them to understand our emotions. If we are happy or sad, or what we need at the moment. That's one point. The other one is, what is the long run? Well, if you think of transhumanism, if we don't exist anymore and there will be only robots, wouldn't it be nice that they also have emotions? To answer yes.
Can I just add quickly to that? One question I wanted to raise with regard to the formulation maybe of the debate, and I realize we're coming from completely different disciplines, so some of the differences are disciplinary, but partly my job has always been kind of asking questions of certain formulations around science, around technology. And I'm wondering about this positioning of us and them, whether that's the most helpful way, because we are still talking about, you know, robots as them, or robots or cyborgs, or whoever they are, but you both kept mentioning the them bit. And the whole them bit and the extrapolation of that kind of external entity that we've kind of partly created with our own measurements, our own cognitive apparatus, our own. So I think the connections are kind of already there. And I'm wondering, what are the philosophical and political implications of that extrapolation, of that construction? Common sense thing, obviously you can say, well, of course it's there because it's separate, it's standing out there from me. But in some sense, in terms of the modeling, the very production of that kind of relationship, what gets truncated in that establishment of that binary between us and them, whether this is the most interesting, most productive way of thinking of that relationship. What kind of control do we retain? What kind of fantasy do we impose through that? Anyway, just a little.
Thank you. Next question.
I'm Jochen Büchel from Munich. I try to develop a holistic systems medicine, and I'm very thankful that you notioned Henri Bergson, Deleuze, and Karen Barrett, because I think interaction, I think we have to cope with this normal causality thinking. And my observation is that in Europe, there's an ideological barrier, that all these systems medicines and nano, that they don't cope with really systemic thinking. And I think the authors you mentioned, they open it, like John Dupre, maybe you know from Exeter, he does not really do metaphysics, he does not go into neo-monologic thinking like Bruno Latour recommended. So my question is, what could we do to overcome ideological barriers? I think that's the problem.
It's a massive question. It's obviously a question that various disciplines, like either cultural studies in Anglo-American world or Kulturwissenschaften in the German-speaking world, have been dealing with for a long time. And it's obviously a question for the politics of today. What do we do to overcome kind of ideological frameworks? In a way, I don't think we do overcome them. We can create better ones, because I'm not, purporting to speak from a neutral position. I've declared that I'm proposing a feminist counter-apocalypse. It is an ideological position. I believe it's kind of ethically more fair, more just. I think it can offer something different. But in a way, I would like to hear from you a little bit more about those kind of models of medicine. Why do you think, I mean, I've got my own theory, but why do you think, especially in medicine, that kind of more connected, more systemic model is not widely adopted? And what kind of models of subjectivity are stopping it from being developed?
There's one strange fear I have. You know that in Germany, during the Nazi times, there were some developments in the direction of spirituality. They did Himalaya exhibitions, they founded Bircher Müsli, they supported him. So I think, and some people, they think if you go to spirituality, some black, some fascist people will come back. That's a small fear, but maybe it's, Zurich is a little bit different. The Swiss ones seem to be more open. So I think we have to renew thinking about world images, and that's why I'm here. And ZKM Karlsruhe, you know that last year they went to Barcelona and had an exhibition with Ramon Llull. He was really a cosmological thinker. Or your colleague Barbara Maria Stafford, one of the first in the world to reintroduce Kabbalah and Neoplatonic thinking. So I think arts can help to change this, and some nice films like Arrival or Matrix, something like this.
Thank you. We're gonna take one last question. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Gunther from Vienna. I have a very naive question for both of you. Robert Trappl, thank you for mentioning emotions and artificial intelligence. It would be interesting to talk about intelligence in general, what it is at all. My naive question is, in how far can upcoming artificial intelligence support us as both individuals and as in society in general to cope with our individual and generalized dark emotions, dark rationality? Is there something, a light at the end of the tunnel? Thank you.
Yeah, may I? Thank you. I just wanted to add, I have been invited to teach artificial intelligence course at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, which I will do in the fall term. And I do not want to start with AI, I want to start with systems. I think what is missing today, if I see students coming to the university, they have this linear causal thinking. And we first have to tell them about interdependencies, what is a system, what is a structure, which kind of systems exist, to introduce them to a more, you would say, holistic, systemic thinking. And then later to put, for example, AI on top, or many other disciplines, like medicine. Yeah? Okay. And to your question, about 30 years ago, I wrote an article about how computer therapy could function. And I had good arguments, I think, at that time for that. For now, I would be very skeptical. We have not really good models of how is the human being, does it feel, how does it react, what are the needs of humans. I'm happy to be one of the partners of the Human Brain Project, where we try very carefully and very slowly to approach that questions which may be helpful in the long run, that maybe AI systems could help. I don't know if they will be better than other humans, but we'll see. Thank you.
My answer will be quite brief, because in a sense, I mean, I believe that we do have the artificial intelligence we deserve. And maybe in the sense, not only do I think that we are also animals, I also think we are partly machines. So in the sense, because I don't have this framework of us and them, so in the sense, I do believe that, of course, we can instigate processes that far exceed our ability to control them. Again, climate science has indicated those processes in different levels. So, of course, the same will happen with artificial intelligence. But to have these processes that, as you said, benefit the human, in a way, I think this is a question to be resolved at, I think, socio-political and ethical level. And I think it's a question where politics, economics, distribution comes in. So they can't be just resolved, but I'm sure most people would probably be in agreement with that. They can't be resolved in kind of abstract technical terms. They can't be discussed as just techno-fixes, because they are not technical problems. They are problems. So it's a matter of, even if we recognize that kind of more connected model, there is the matter of returning to what I earlier called the cut. How do we cut? Where do we cut through that network of identities? How do we make these decisions? Who is in charge? And, you know, we know today who is in charge. And they're basically, it's a procession of strong men kind of dressed up and behaving like these kind of robocops. And you see who is in charge of politics. And it's that kind of same rhetoric. So how do we change that?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, audience, for your interest. We're going to have a very short break now. A break of only, yeah. Okay, it's only 5 minutes. It's only a 5 minutes break, so it's not really a coffee break. It may be a very short espresso break. We're going to start with the next session on